It's like.
She didn't fib. Fibbing is different than lying.
Happy week 4, everybody. How are we all feeling?
Joke around, deny,
That kind of a perpetual state of being for training
messing
students.
around. She intentionally was
Just exhausted.
I think you just don't like.
Yeah.
Yeah, because her name's Leah or whatever.
You're in the right. You're in the right main for that.
It was.
I have some announcements I want to make real quick before we get too into the weeds here. I want to make sure we have announcements taken care of. As a reminder, if you really want that extra credit opportunity, please make sure you volunteer for VITA. Time is running out. I say that I don't know that Kyle in general would actually refuse you if you showed up after VITA started and offered to volunteer. But I'm going to say time is running. Okay, time is running out of opportunity, so please make sure you take advantage of that. It's a good opportunity, and I think that seminar students, they're making them greeters this year. Is that what I've been told about? So you get to do taxes without even doing taxes, which is just amazing. Just amazing. Yes. And then so please keep that in mind. I do want to talk really quickly about Wednesday. So I'm going to say some things that you're probably not going to like, and that happens. If the worst comes to worst, that's fair. You can bash me on my evaluations for it, but that's okay. So Wednesday, the plan currently is that we're doing FBLA Day. All right. Now, Dr. Caden, I talked to her. By the way, just so everybody knows, today is Dr. Caden's birthday. So see Dr. Caden, wish her happy birthday. Okay. Wish her happy birthday. I missed my opportunity. She sent me an email at 1:15 a.m. this morning, and I was not awake, so I couldn't wish her happy birthday in response to that. But you can wish her happy birthday during the day today. I think she could use the ups because I know she's been really busy, and Carter was sick over the weekend, so she probably could use a little bit of happy. So everybody. In fact, we're going to go right now. We're going to sing happy birthday outside of
Let's go.
Yeah, that would be something. It says, why aren't you teaching seminar and auditing? Dr. Barnes says, I thought this is more important. All right. Getting back on track. I went to Dr. Caden's office to drop off my customary birthday card. I was actually pretty nice because I knew she was able to go of it. I was going to buy her one hat that said happy 100th birthday on it. They actually have those at Hy-Vee, believe it or not. But I didn't because I didn't want to bash on her too hard. And she was telling me that the forecast for Wednesday is freezing rain, which she's really concerned the FBLA Day may be canceled. Okay. If that is the case, then it will be rescheduled for next Wednesday. Okay. Now I know what you're all thinking. It says, okay, that means we get 2 days off from auditing instead of 1. And my answer to that is no, you don't. Okay. If in the event, okay, so I try not to naysay Dr. Caden. I think it's unlikely that FBLA Day would cancel because it looks like it's not even going to be until early morning that rain starts. That being said, I also didn't think that we'd close campus for COVID, and I was completely wrong about that. So I didn't realize it was such a big deal. I try not to question Dr. Caden. So if we do cancel class or cancel FBLA Day on Wednesday, we will be having class on Wednesday morning. And I will let you all know as soon as I possibly can about when it's going to happen. I'll give you an update. I do want to talk about 2 possible scenarios. One possible scenario is that FBLA Day is canceled, but we still have class on campus, where campus is still open. If that happens, we'll be meeting here and we will be starting the next group assignment. I will accept that you probably will have not done the individual questions at that point yet. And that's fine. I think there's probably plenty of time to do work through the individual projects and everything else. But the basic idea is that we'll do the first part of the assignment in class on Wednesday, and then we'll move forward the timeline so that we can do the debrief next Monday, and then the 12th we'll be canceling class. So we'll be having class on Wednesday. If campus is closed, we will meet on Zoom, okay? And then we'll break up into groups and everybody will have their Zoom meeting on groups, okay? So I can consider that possibility. I think this is probably a low chance scenario, but I don't want the panic to happen if something does go on and everybody says, okay, well, FBLA Day is canceled, so I've got a free day. Your training students should get free days. Okay, so that's kind of the backup plan. I hope it's not like that. I hope that everything goes according to plan, but sometimes things get us thrown asunder. So, I believe that's it. So just for context, I think if I remember correctly, The case that we're gonna be working on next is an internal controls testing case, so there's not a lot of work that you had to do in advance. You may want to take a look at it already. It's just to get the context for it, but most of the work you can do as a group anyway. So it's a good possible scenario for that. Right. And, you know, maybe not a short stay on it either. I'm stay in any case time. Sorry, I'm picking on you. Yeah. There's actually an old story. I'm sure I've told the story before, but there's a series of graduate students, not just one graduate student, that they were very renowned for wearing gym shorts in any weather. Okay, and I think there's probably a lot of students that they're just kind of like, if I can get away wearing gym shorts, I'm going to do that. So I remember when my transition occurred, I was still in college, and I was wearing shorts and I was wearing a t-shirt, and I thought, okay, this is going to be fine. It's going to be a big day. And the weather was like 30 degrees. And I was like, this was a mistake. Okay. And so, yeah, that was the point where I basically said, I'm no longer invincible, that can't get away with stuff like that. So that was where kind of the pendulum swung. And I said, yeah, I'm gonna wear more clothes rather than. All right. I know we've gone way off track here. I apologize, guys, but I don't want to get all these things to talk about. So today, we have a case that we're going to be talking about ethics and professional conduct, and this is a little bit of a misleading case, as I do look for very specific responses when I'm going through and evaluating the case. I don't want you to think, okay, if I gave a wrong response, that I'm going to lose points. You're going to get full grade for completing the case regardless. But I do evaluate these cases separately. It's part of kind of an evaluation of how well students can apply problem-solving techniques and ethics techniques within the context of our own program, and seeing how we do that. And I've done this now for going on 5 years, and this is the exact same case we've used. And so you're going to find that the questions look really weird and they're worded very strangely. And the reason I do that is to make sure that people are anchored and focused on very specific issues. So if it seems like this is a very, very strange approach to this particular case, it's intended to be for very specific reasons that I won't disclose. Just trust me when I say that I'm evaluating things well beyond just the nature of the case. Now, there's a lot to take in with this case, even though it's like only 2 pages long. There's a lot to talk about. So this is Leanne Walker, and for context, Dr. Knapp's cases all come from real life cases. He's changed real life scenarios. He's changed the names of the participants. For context, I was not a restaurant at Burnell's restaurant, or I was not a manager at Burnell's Restaurante. Okay, no matter what the book says, but he does change the names in the case book, which is to note. But this scenario actually happened to one of his former students, and so it's interesting to think about what happened. So going back in context, we're looking probably late 90s, early 2000s, and CPA exam still existed at that time. We did it on wood and chisel, and so that was the case. Now, it was a paper-based test, actually. I make the joke that that's almost as bad, but we did have computers at the time, but the CPA had not learned how to actually use computers for testing purposes. So that was kind of the scenario. And we'd all gather in a big convening center. Like when I did it, it was in Tulsa, and it was the Tulsa Convention Center. So a whole bunch of tables set up with scratch paper and pencils, multiple pencils, and calculators for the calculation sections. And we would be there for 2 days straight. We do one test in the morning, one test in the afternoon, and the next day, one test in the morning, one test in the afternoon. And was it grueling? Yes. Okay. But it's one of those things that people took a lot of pride in and say, I survived it. And if you passed on the first try, you were considered to be an all-star. And that is the crux of this particular case. That is the crux of this case. Now, a lot of people, just because this always comes up, a lot of people ask me, it says, was it harder to pass the exam back than it is now? And the answer is, I don't know, because I haven't taken the exam, but I would say that it's probably harder now to pass the exam, because they deliberately kind of went soft on a few points of the exam because there's so much content. I mean, if you think about the largest section of the exam now, that's substantially smaller than taking all 4 parts at one time. So they went pretty soft on it. And there was even stories about grading, like if you got 3 sections, you passed 3 sections, and you got really close on the 4th section, they would bump your grade up. They admitted to doing that, which is funny, because one section I got exactly 75 on. And so there's a possibility that I got slightly less than that, and they bumped me up because they didn't want to have me take that last section again. So yeah. So that being said, there's a lot more rigor in the content nowadays, even though you take each section separately. That's the easy part, but the hard part is you have to know a lot more of the individual sections. So just in case that question came up, if you didn't care, I just wasted like 2 minutes of your life. That was kind of the context for this particular topic, is that Leanne Walker wanted to be one of those people that was viewed as having passed the exam on the first try, because you're a superstar if you do that. Everybody's just kind of like, oh, wow, you accomplished it. And the nature of the exam was a lot different back then. There was not the fast pass review sections where after you finish your graduate program, they take a summer off and then everybody takes this for the exam and most people pass it to do that. It was kind of accepted that you got your bachelor's degree, you went to work almost immediately after you graduated, like in June, and you were expected to sit or to work on the CPA exam while you were employed. So that was the challenge. I was very fortunate in the fact that I was not working when I was taking the CPA exam. I was doing this as my full-time job, so I kind of cheated in that regard. And so I don't want anybody going out now and saying, well, you know, Dr. Bart's cheated on the CPA exams. We'll have to ask him how he did that. The answer is study for it full-time. That's the way you get past it, okay? So yeah, that's something you should consider for the summer as well. All right. So that was kind of the context. If you passed the first try, you were considered to be an all-star. Same other rules applied, like with the Elijah Watt-Sells Award. If you did really, really well, then you got national recognition. They actually had medaling ceremonies depending on how well you did relative to everybody else. I knew people that got gold medals when they passed the exam, and it was kind of cheesy, but still kind of interesting. So Leanne Walker, she had sat for the CPA exam, right? She went to work and she sat for the CPA exam, and she started her job, and she had a manager who was a tough but fair manager. Her name was Jackie Vaughn, I believe is the name. And so Jackie was saying, they were having lunch and everything was going well. Leanne was doing good work. Jackie said, hey, have you taken the CPA exam yet? And this is the point of the context. Okay? It's the point of the issue, the crux of the, I don't know what the word is. You guys know what I'm talking about. So Leanne could have said, oh yes, but I don't think I passed. That was what she was thinking in her head. But she didn't want to have the reputation of somebody who did not pass on the first try. So she was like, no, I have not taken it yet. I'm sitting in November. And so, because she was confident she did not do well. As every single student who ever sat for the CPA exam thinks, they take it as this, yeah, I didn't think I did very well. Okay. Sure. If you do think you did well, you're like one of the rare exceptions. So that's going to be a feeling that you have. That's a feeling that every single student has in CPA exams. Yeah, I didn't pass. All right. And I seem to remember there were actually some students that actually told that to me, and then I saw their results and they got like 94, 95 on it. So yeah, I didn't pass is a common refrain. She said, all right, well, that's fine. You know what? If you need my materials to study, you can pass it on. Just like, I think so. I'll take it on. All right. So if that had been the end of it, everything had been fine. But what ended up happening is that Leanne, in fact, did pass the exam. So hurrah, hooray. She goes and tells Jackie, and Jackie's just going like, good job. That's excellent. I'm glad to hear it. That's not what happened. So what happened is Jackie said, hey, you told me you didn't sit for the exam. And Leanne's like, oh, caught in a lie. So she quit the firm and was never heard from again. And that's not it. She said, oh, yeah, I told you that because I didn't want you, because I didn't think I passed, and I didn't want to be considered to be somebody who didn't pass the first try. And I understand the pressure I was in, and you get it, right? Jackie did not get it, okay? Jackie did not. Jackie was just kind of like, you know what? I'm not cool with this. You go do your thing, and we're gonna be a little bit separate for a while, okay? We're gonna have a few moments apart. So Leah finished her engagement, goes on, and then she goes and talks to the partner, and she's thinking the partner's going to congratulate me for passing the CPA exam on the first try. This is great. The partner's like, I'm afraid we got something serious going on here. He says, yeah, you lied to your manager. He says, yeah, but it wasn't anything important. I just lied about the CPA exam. It's like, yeah, you have to understand that lying about anything that reflects upon your ethics and your integrity, and she doesn't feel comfortable working with you, and we don't feel comfortable having you here, so hit the road. And so it wasn't quite that bad. It wasn't quite like there was no recourse, but there was that statement that you're no longer working the firm. The good news is that when they canceled her out, I think that was the term they used, which I love that term for firing. That makes it seem like it's something else. Counseled you out. They said they weren't gonna disclose it to other firms about why you were let go from the firm, which I guess that's small recompense, but yeah, so I don't know. This is an interesting question. What would you, if you were a hiring firm, what would you think? Says, oh, this person passed the CPA exam in the first try, yeah, but she had her job and was let go after 6 months. That's weird. There's probably more to it than there. I should probably figure out what's going on. That's one of those things that I'd be automatically suspicious about if I was a hiring firm. This is like, why we got this all-star who was let go after 6 months. But that wasn't the crux of the case. That wasn't the crux of the case. The crux of the case was I had you answer some questions. And so we're going to think about this both from a professional context and from an ethical context. And so let's go ahead and talk about the baseline, what I want you all to think about. And let's go ahead and just, what do you guys think? Were Leanne's actions right or wrong? That's a simple question. You had to answer this question first. So I'm sure everybody else, and everybody's like saying, I don't want to answer this because if I answer differently than everybody else. All right, so let's just do it the easy way. Did anybody say her actions were right? No kidding. Okay. What was your justification for it?
I said, well, I kind of said that they were, that she wasn't necessarily in the wrong. I mean, lying is wrong and probably wasn't professional, but being fired from the firm isn't really justified for that. Like,
That was kind of consistent with that you both had. So Colin said, John. All right, I got the alphabetical order correct. Okay.
yeah.
All right. You're both wearing hats today, so there's no clue there. So and you're wearing exactly the same way, both turn around back of your head. So you're just messing with me. I already know that. So, but yeah, you kind of said the same thing, John.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so I think that there is some legitimacy to that argument. Okay. Now the reason why I tried to be very, very specific on this particular question is these are somewhat separate issues. Okay. Did the firm overreact? I think we can argue about that all day. I personally felt that the firm overreacted. If I was in a situation where I heard about this, I'd be as another manager going up to Jackie Vaughn and said, "You are a terrible human being. You know that?" And it's just kind of like, you realize this career is on the line. She lied about something that was a little white lie, and you're just kind of like, you can't get over that, right? I'd be all in Jackie's face. I don't know that I would have the courage to say, though, that what she did was what Leanne did was right by the very strict nature, because there's an argument about whether or not we could justify lying. Could it be justifiable? Possibly. I think that there was definitely a reaction, but the question itself was more about whether this was right or wrong. And I think that if we split it down, even if we can say that the actions were not justified, we can't really we can't say that this was correct course of action. And so that's kind of the first point that we have to identify, is that this was definitely a wrong action. And so how do we move forward from here? And that is where the professional judgment comes in. That's where the issue comes in. And that's also where we have to kind of think about this from an ethical perspective. So I wanted you all to use some ethical framework. So I had you look at one that I found online. I believe this is from Will Open. There we go. Yeah, from Santa Clara University, a framework for ethical decision making. So it defines ethics, and I want to really be very clear about ethics, because I think you probably had courses where you talked about ethics before. I have some very, very specific feelings that they do not necessarily align with what other instructors believe about ethics. But my primary concern about ethics is that you can't teach a person to be ethical, okay? No matter how much I might harp on you all, I cannot change the people that you are inherently. Okay, I can change your perspective on things. I can make you see things that you may not have thought about before. I can have you look at things differently. But if, say, for example, there's somebody who's a notorious fraudster in this room and is going to go on and have a career of white collar crime, I'm not going to mention any names. I'm not going to mention any names. But what? Just because I was staring at you, Kirsten, you thought I was talking about you? Maybe I was deliberately looking from avoiding looking over like Sydney or Leah, you know. Oh, okay, all right. No, let's assume that there's somebody in here. I could make the point and saying, says, well, that's not an ethical action. People already know what an ethical action is or isn't, and they make their decisions about whether or not they're going to take ethical steps. And I will say that there's different circumstances where that might change. Do we assume that Leanne Walker probably lied in everything that she did? She lied about a lot of stuff. She probably didn't lie very much. She was under a very specific pressure in this situation that was identified. And we know that that pressure can lead people to do things that they would normally wouldn't do in other scenarios where there's no existing pressure. All right, so yeah, I believe that ethics is one of those things that you can't teach ethics itself, but you can teach about ethical concepts and how to view ethical decision making. And that might give us a better perspective on how we can actually approach this from an auditing perspective. So yeah, and again, some of your other instructors may not agree with me, but I think the more important question is that not whether or not you can exhibit ethics, but can you understand ethical perspectives that other people have? And this is an interesting question, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but can we say that people in the United States particularly have different views on important issues in this world? Yeah. So if I gave you my perspective on a particular issue, if I said, here's what I believe about a particular issue, could you say that I was wrong? Yes. Okay. You could say that, but does that mean anything? I could justify my position and you could still completely disagree with me, but does that mean one of us is wrong and one of us is right? Maybe not. And that's kind of the nature of the nature of this discussion, is that trying to understand and appreciate that just because somebody does something that we don't agree with does not make them wrong or right. And so ethics, and I realize the hypocrisy in framing this, because I actually had you answer the first question, is something wrong or right? We're not now going to be justifying whether the actions are wrong or right, but are they justifiable? And if so, how can we justify them according to various ethical frameworks? So let's go ahead and look at some. And some of these, there's six ethical lenses. Some of these are definitely more profound than others. All right. So the first one is called the rights lens. All right. And it says that the ethical action is the one that best protects and respects the moral rights of those affected. I think that this is a very, very powerful one, where we talk about where one person's rights begins where another one ends, or where one ends is where another one begins. So as long as you're not impeding on other people's rights, then your actions are completely, totally justified. Okay. And we see a lot of this, like people having slogans or, wearing clothing that people do not like, and that I'm upset by this. Is they're not doing anything to you. How can you get upset about something like that? They're not impeding on your rights. Therefore, you can't really justify that they're saying that they're doing anything wrong. Okay. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily applicable in this situation. Could we make an argument that that Leanne lying to Jackie somehow intruded upon Jackie's rights? Maybe we say that a manager deserves to know the truth in all situations. There's maybe an argument there. But this one, I think, is probably not as applicable, but there's some applicability in our scenario. All right. The justice lens. This one's an interesting one. So the idea that a person should be given their due, what people are due, is interpreted as fair and equal treatment. Now, this is an interesting one because I don't think it applies to the initial question. Okay, whether or not what Leanne did was right or wrong. Okay, I do think it's very applicable to the eventual treatment that she received after that. All right, so we talked about the overreaction, whether or not that was a just action, and there's some concern in that regard. And you notice I deliberately didn't poll. I don't want that particular issue to judge this, but we could actually make the argument, a very fair argument, that say that the firm was definitely in the wrong in the way that they treated Leanne, because this was a simple little thing that was not worth that particular uproar. Some of you may disagree with me. Some of you may say, well, I don't accept that ethical lens. I believe that a lie is a lie is a lie. But there's some context to this for the second question. I don't think is ultimately relevant to our first question, but it's still an important one to discuss. Then the utilitarian lens, okay? So basically utilitarianism is kind of considered the greatest good. And whatever happens, it doesn't really matter what the means are, as long as the ends are justified by did it accomplish the greatest good. This is kind of the loosely interpreted the Robin Hood scenario. It's like, is stealing from somebody wrong? We say, yeah, well, absolutely wrong. So what if you steal somebody who doesn't even notice that it's gone and you feed it to or give it to people who need food? It's like, oh, well, then it's completely, totally justified. And then I've just made you say two completely contradictory things. And then I get the right to fire you from the firm because you said two contradictory things. Now, utilitarian framework is very, very hard to interpret because it's already hard to justify what is the greatest happiness, the greatest good, okay? Now, this one, again, I'm not sure how applicable it is in our scenario. We could make an argument that Leanne's perception of a first-time passer of the CPA exam would give her a lot more credence and a lot more acclaim than she would if they thought that she had not passed it on the first try. And so we can make the argument that she was trying to preserve that particular aspect, that particular perception. And that was going to be the greatest good for everyone involved, regardless of the lie. That's a stretch though, but I do think that the utilitarian framework is one that we have to be very cognizant of, because that is where most people naturally operate. I would say that every one of us probably thinks about what our own personal happiness is and what the happiness around us are. And we don't deliberately take actions that we think are going to cause more harm than good. So, common good lens. Our actions should contribute to the common good, interlocking relationships. So basically understanding how our actions are going to affect others. Now, this one I think is extremely relevant to our particular discussion. We're talking about the common good approach. We talk about how Leanne's actions would impact the perception of others around her, particularly Jackie, who seemed tough but fair. And when we talk about tough but fair, it means that if you lie to her, you don't get another chance. Okay. So had she known that scenario, she may not have taken actions. She may have said, well, I'd like you to keep this to yourself, but I have taken the CPA exam, but I would like people to know about that because I don't want them to think that I didn't pass the first try, because I'm pretty sure I didn't. I don't know. If she maybe taken that approach, it might have been a little bit easier, but obviously the common good approach doesn't happen to make that distinction about what specific information did you share. Virtue lens. Virtue is basically says that actions ought to be consistent with certain ideal virtues that provide for the full development of humanity. So an example of a virtue is don't lie. Okay, always tell the truth. This is an extreme one, and I think that people who actually adopt this, they tend to be kind of frowned upon if you take really, really extreme approaches. I think what is the comment I always said in auditing is never use absolutes, and this is kind of an absolute perspective. So I think the virtue lens, it's in theory, it's a very, very powerful perspective. In practice, I don't think anybody applies to that. Very few people apply to that. There may be a few just shining paragons, but very few people are going to keep that. I know I definitely don't. And then care ethics, okay? You need to listen and respond to individuals in certain circumstances rather than merely following rules of calculating utility. So this is number 6, and I think this may be the most applicable one in this scenario. So with respect to the first question, was the action right or wrong? That one I don't think has changed. I think we've kind of come to the conclusion the action was right. But then we start asking the question, was the action of the firm justified? Now, again, I did not deliberately ask that question. We're going to talk through the different frameworks and talk a little bit about the scenario from that. But this one kind of wraps up everything we've been talking about, is that we have to think about all parties involved when we come to a conclusion, not just how it affects us, not how it affects one individual, not how it affects a small group of individuals, but everybody who's a stakeholder and interest. And I think from an auditing perspective, this is probably the most relevant perspective that we should have for all our decision-making purposes. All right, so going back to the questions, all right. So after reading through a framework for ethical decision-making, reevaluate the layout and Walker staff account case using the tools in the framework. Be sure to cite specific examples in the case to support your conclusions. Now, I want to skip the first question because I think that there's not going to be a substantial change. We're not going to make a change in argument about whether what Leanne did was right or wrong. But I would like to reevaluate the firm's actions based on one of these lenses. So does anybody want to share what lens they took a perspective of and what their eventual conclusion was? My personal conclusion, you kind of heard me talk about it. Mine was the care ethics lens, and I thought if we consider all parties involved, the firm's actions were not justified because what they did was basically catering to two people's perspectives about something that was right or wrong, but the harm that was caused to another individual does not justify that perspective. You can't justify it. Again, that's my perspective. You are welcome to disagree with me. My word is not law except in this classroom. Okay. But with respect to anything else, you're certainly welcome to a different perspective. So did anybody use have a similar perspective or use a different lens? Nobody else, no? What'd you say, Sydney?
Well, I also said that CARE's ethic lens, but I looked at it from other lenses too. And I know you mentioned like the right lens wasn't one to, like it didn't super apply, but I think I used it in the terms of like, Walker had a right to like share her personal information how she wished, and then Vaughn or Jackie had the right to respond in the way she wanted. And so I said like more just action would have been to, like, put Walker on a different client. Rather than her. So then Jackie wouldn't have to work with her, but then Walker could still have a job.
So that raises an interesting point with respect to the rights lens, and one that I hadn't considered before, but we can talk about here. All right, so Jackie asked this question and was looking for a response. Okay, so what were Leanne Walker's possible responses here? Okay, there was the response she gave where she said, "I haven't sat for the CPA exam yet." Okay, which has its own. It was basically trying to save face. Then there was the response of, "I sat for it, but I don't think I passed." All right. Is that the only array of responses that we can have in the scenario? But implicitly speaking, if we take a response like, let's say that Leanne gave a response like, "I'd rather not talk about it," would that have caused a harm that we're not really foreseeing in this particular scenario? Like, say you're a manager, then you're just asking in good faith, saying, "Have you sat for the CPA exam yet?" Says, "I'd rather not talk about it." What is going to happen to your perception of that individual?
I'm not ready.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something wrong with this individual. They're not willing to share information. Either they're not prepared for the CPA exam. They never will be. There's certain perceptions that are associated with that. So can we make the argument that Jackie's question was kind of a leading question, that Leanne was forced into a limited array of responses? That there's a whole bunch of different responses, like you could have flipped Jackie off and say, "We're never talking again," or something like that. That's obviously not a rational response, but the way that Jackie framed the question basically said that Leanne could only respond to it in a limited number of ways. And some of those were going to be naturally wrong just to try to preserve face. So there may be some argument that the rights framework in there was applicable because the rights were being violated by asking the question in the way it was asked. That some of the rights that Leanne had were not applicable in that scenario. Again, that's speculation. That's not something I ever thought about before, which is funny because we've talked about this for 5 years, and this is a new perspective that I've had. Hold on.
I took, for the right lens, I took the opposite stance. I said that maybe Jackie deserves the right to at least know the truth about where you're at in the process of taking the CPA. Like lying, saying that you didn't take it, should be truthful to your employer.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting perspective. This one has come up into some degree, but I tried not to harp too much on it because I don't want any bad feelings about this. But let's just go ahead and examine this, open-eyed and knowing that I'm not making any judgments on this. But we live in a day and age where we're very, very concerned about our own privacy and security and disclosure of information. Okay, so oftentimes when questions are asked, they're made from that perspective. Can we say that our employer does have a right to know certain piece of information about their employees? Yeah. So this is taken from perspective of this day and age, saying, well, she doesn't have to share that information. She's under no obligation to. There may be an argument saying, yes, she does have an obligation to share that information, and Jackie has a right to know the open and honest truth. So, and again, that's probably not a very popular perspective, particularly given the environment that we operate in today. I would say if we went back 20 years ago, that would made even much bigger arguments. When this case was originally considered and conceived, that would have been a much bigger argument saying, yeah, she absolutely has a right to know what's going on in your head. Whereas today we can kind of say that's a little bit suspicious, a little bit suspect, a little bit sus for lack of a better term. What do you think, Tyler?
I think that they fired her because, like this scenario, she had pressure, so then she felt like she had to lie. So she put her impression like of what others thought of her over telling the truth. So maybe later down the road, a more important decision comes up and more pressure, then maybe they thought she was going to lie again.
That's an interesting one, and this one has kind of come up in some arguments because I did frame this pressure. We know pressure is one of the aspects of the fraud triangle. And fraudulent behavior is not just restricted to a business environment, that we can have fraudulent behavior in personal interactions. Like I could say, could fraudulent behavior occur in this classroom? Yes, it could occur every Friday. Somebody could say, Dr. Barnes doesn't really look at my computer. I could just pull up my notes and I could cheat on the quiz. Don't do that, by the way. But I could do that, okay? And there's definitely pressure and there's definitely opportunity and rationalization that could occur there. So what do we say as auditors that we have primary control over? We say opportunity is the one that we can control. Is it fair for us to, okay, all right. Is it fair for us is it fair to them as an accounting firm to punish Leanne for feeling the pressure in that situation? I don't know, okay? But it's definitely not something we can justify a rigor over because we have no control over the pressure that Leanne feels. Could we have affected the opportunity there? Yes, maybe not ask questions where they have the potential to lie, or put them in a frame, such a framing that she feels forced that she has to lie about them. Say, you know what, I'm just curious, you don't feel free if you don't want to share any information with me, but I'm just curious, I can help you out with the CPA exam if you haven't said yet. Maybe that would have been a better frame where she wouldn't have had felt the pressure, and there wouldn't have necessarily been an opportunity there for that lie to exist. Maybe that's a perspective we need to take, is that if we're deliberately asking questions where an opportunity comes up that somebody can bear that kind of perspective, then we're not framing the questions correctly. So interesting stuff.
I brought up a point that the employer, or like she lied to the employer, that they're willing to lie about other companies like being let go.
Interesting. So they're being deceptive about why they let her go in the first place. So that's an interesting question. Is not revealing information the same thing as lying? Some people say no, some people say yes. I see some shaking heads, I see some nodding heads. Different perspective. Obviously, it's voluntary information what they want to do. And there's an argument they're saying that the reason they don't share that information is for litigation purposes. But that being said, it's really, really hard to be all high and mighty and says, well, we don't lie, but we also don't tell the truth. Okay. It's funny, I'm actually reading a book series right now where a group of characters in the book actually, they are incapable of lying. They're not capable of doing it. So they're really well known of not telling the entire truth. They become very evasive when they're asked questions that are very direct. So that's kind of the perspective I'm taking, is that, evasiveness is also kind of a form of dishonesty if you think about it from that perspective. What do you think, Lois?
Sorry, I have a stretch first.
Okay. I saw you raise your hand. I was hoping, I hope I'm not catching what she's just
It
stretching.
was a half and half. So I kind of looked at it from obligation versus requirements, and what she did doesn't violate the definition of integrity under the AICPA rules of conduct, and unless your employer has a policy requiring disclosure of when you sit for the exams, you're under no ethical obligation to share that information.
Okay. So that leads into like the last question, which I wanted to lead into, because we have the rules of conduct, and these are kind of the guidelines that dictate, especially with respect to audit, these are the guidelines that dictate behavior. Now, I know that the argument is that these are more ethical perspectives, but even then, you can actually be held in violation of rules of conduct for actions outside of an audit. For example, if you get arrested for disorderly behavior or disorderly conduct during the weekend, this AICPA can actually rescind your license because they can actually think that as an act as credible. That's not something that we would assume to be something that a CPA in good standing would actually, an action they would actually take. So the question then becomes, is that was there violations here that we can identify with respect to the rules of conduct? So let's just go ahead and take a quick look at the rules of conduct. Okay, we're not going to go over all the ancillary rules like the exceptions to the rule, but I do want to just quickly go through as we have it. So integrity and objectivity, obviously, be honest and be impartial. Independence, no material and direct interest in the clients. Independence is a really, really big one. As a spoiler, I don't think we have to worry about independence in this particular issue. I think independence is safe in this one, so we don't have to go down the rabbit hole of trying to talk about what are all the particular avenues of independence that could be violated here. I don't think it's relevant in any context. General standards, professional competence through professional care, planning and supervision, submission roll in the data. Compliance with standards, follow GAS, accounting principles, follow GAAP. Acts discreditable, be good. Contingent fees, no. Admissions or referral fees, most scenarios, no. Advertising solicitation, generally okay as long as it's not misleading. Confidential client information, confidential obviously in the form of organization name. Don't say you're allowed to perform CPA services that you aren't. All right. Honestly speaking, most of these are not going to be relevant. Okay. Question is the ones that are relevant, are they truly relevant? Now, Lotus has actually made an argument that there's not really a direct contradiction or a direct action against any of these rules. And I can see that perspective, okay? I can see that perspective for sure. Did anyone identify one of the rules that they felt was in violation here or a violation of the rules from Leanne's actions? What do you think, Matt?
First up, the integrity and objectivity part.
Yeah.
Not so much the objectivity part, but was not acting with integrity. she knew she wasn't acting.
Right, so acting with integrity, again, even though we're not talking about specifically about an engagement, but we're talking about the conduct within context of the CPA's actions. Lying about a particular scenario is a very obvious violation of integrity. Now, what is the scale or what is the scope of this action? Is it enough to be considered to be a violation of CPA principles? That's a separate argument, because then we have to figure out significance of it. And we as accountants already know that our profession takes a big stake in significance of the issue. And if we say I did not eat your donut, that's a big difference from I did not steal your car. Okay. A lot of significant things were stopped at the size of the assets, and the size of the asset probably had a lot of relevance there. And by the way, I did not steal anyone's donut or steal anyone's car, so I can say that with all certainty. All right, so integrity and objectivity. Integrity is kind of the issue there. I think that's kind of the one that stands out the most apparent. But did anyone else identify any other issues that might be violations here? Acts discreditable. Okay, so the question is that where they're lying about something like that could actually be considered to be an act discreditable. Now, that one's one that's really challenging, because usually acts discreditable is considered to be a pretty significant issue. So again, we're on scale here. Whether or not lying about an issue about whether this after the CBA exam is something that the ACCT would take us into that context. Again, subjective. It's very subjective here, and depending on who you talk about, you're going to get different answers in the situation. But I think we can all agree that this is probably one that we could consider as a possible rules violation. So even if we don't agree whether or not it is a rules violation, it's one that we could consider for that context. Any others? Contingent fees, obviously, but okay, so no, not contingent fees. Those were kind of my two ones. I made a possible argument for general standards, okay, and due professional care. This is very, very loose, and I will admit this very loose. Due professional care kind of talks about professional conduct both on an engagement, but that's dictated by your conduct outside of engagement. And I'll be honest, if I knew somebody was not acting with integrity in their personal life, I'd be really, really concerned about whether they'd acted with integrity on the client. We've already talked about pressures that are implicit on client engagements. Remember this? Remember we guys did that in auditing? Okay. What was the crux of that one? That I put somebody into? Was anybody in this classroom the question holder that I had? Did I make anybody in this classroom the auditor for that one?
Or was it?
I know I made John and Colin both count. I just thought that was too much of an opportunity to miss, but I can't remember who the auditor was. I did the poor John Vincent this last time around, this last Wednesday. But Tyler, were you the auditor? Okay.
I forgot.
Were you under pressure in that situation?
A little bit.
A little bit, because I put you in a very uncomfortable situation. You had to either pinpoint 3 people in the classroom and say, yeah, you guys get no points. Or you had to do a really weird mathematical operation, I guess, from between 1 and 3. Okay, which again, from a computational perspective, was completely and totally the wrong answer. But most of the people that I've ever done this activity for, that's the one they chose. Okay, people do not necessarily behave rationally when emotions are on the line. And so, if that has to do with due professional care, think about the context of that. If she was put in a much bigger pressure situation, it's like, oh, this is a very, very sweet little lady. I don't want her to lose her job. Doesn't matter that she's violating controls infrastructure all over the place. Okay, that's a concern we have to take into care. So some really concerns there. Now, I'm not going to say that there are any obvious violations. This is not the argument here. We're trying to think about this from more of a holistic perspective about whether this is a concern. But these are the kind of issues that we have to think about when we're thinking about when we're thinking about problems of this nature. Now, let's think about the ultimate one. And I've already kind of led into this. I don't think that directly speaking, this is an issue that for which the punishment justifies the crime. But there's some concern about integrity as it relates to professionalism on an engagement. If you're willing to lie about something that's so incredibly small, like saying, okay, my reputation, I don't want my reputation to be sacrificed, so I'm going to lie, bold-faced lie to a manager. And if that is the only rationalization you need, then how small of rationalization would you need on engagement when things really do matter? I think the way that we argue that this was not justified is to say this is something that the penalty itself was restricted to one person, and it was not something that was going to affect the firm in an adverse way. The firm was making the argument says, we're not concerned about what happened here. We're concerned about the potential of what may happen down the line. So the counterpoint to that justification, because I say that this is not justified in the scenario, is that if we don't check it now, then it may go unchecked in the future. Now, what is the possible scenario that this all gets washed out? We say, all right, Leanne, what you did was wrong. You're going to be sanctioned for this. It's going to go in your permanent file. If you lie about something like this again, you'll be in much more significant trouble. Would that have possibly kind of made her realize the severity of this particular scenario and then make her understand that we're not concerned about you lying in this. We're concerned about you lying about something that's significant and serious, because that is where the crime is. And what do you all think? Do you think Leanne probably would have taken that seriously in this scenario? We obviously don't know Leanne. It could be that Leanne was, in reality, was a compulsive liar and she lied about everything. Her name wasn't even Leanne, as we already know. Okay, so she's already lying about that. Okay, so is it that possibility? Sure. But given the characterization that we have from this case, it felt like this was not somebody who was willingly trying to do something that was harmful or duplicitous. They were just trying to protect themselves. Again, some concerns both directions there. So at the end of the day, when we come to the conclusion about what's happening in this case, does anybody really just have a round direction where they're just kind of like, okay, this was absolutely right or this is absolutely wrong? Or can we kind of say that there's multiple perspectives on this issue? Are we all in agreement there's multiple perspectives and they're all valid? That's good, because that's all I wanted to confuse you with today, okay? I just wanted you to recognize that it's important, especially in our profession, that we acknowledge other perspectives. I will say that that's probably really important in life, and not enough of us do that. I'm not going to try to control what you think in your life, okay? If you believe that squirrels actually do fly and you're not going to, or no, better yet, let's say you do believe the earth is flat and you're not going to accept any evidence to the contrary, okay? I'm getting really political now, I shouldn't do that, so yeah. If you believe the squirrels do fly and you're not accepting any evidence to the contrary, that is your perspective, but you do need to take the open mind perspective of your job and your careers, because that's going to be something that you're going to be judged by. All right, I will see you all either on Friday or on Wednesday, depending on circumstances, but I'll let you know. Have a good day.